Welcome, 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 Millicent. Glad you could join this meeting. Um, really, today we're going to be talking about Photoshop. We do have people trickling in, so at least I'm here. So hopefully we can have a good session this time. All right. So really, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And as we've talked about, the Halos residency is really just about learning something new. Like, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation to share, but instead, I do have over 15 or 20 years of experience with Photoshop that we can talk about. And that's all I'm going to talk about today. Just want to make sure I'm not getting that infinity screen, which looks like I'm getting. So let me stop that and present my other screen. Let me present something else. Okay. Yeah, I think we can show screen two. Can everyone see my screen? You can either type in the chat and the version of Photoshop that I'll be using for this demo today is really Photoshop CS6. And I'm not even sure which year Photoshop CX6 was created, but it sounds like such a long time ago now. I know when I was learning Photoshop, it used to be Photoshop CS2. That's what I started with. And this was, I know I'm telling you my age, but this was a long time ago, right? And it was exciting because it's this new tool and we were all just excited about it. Like, how do we learn this new tool? My cousins had just sent me a computer at the time, a laptop, and I just wanted to explore because all we had was Yahoo, Gmail. I don't even know if there was Gmail then. There probably was, but and I'm talking like in the early 2000s. So eventually, I was like, okay, I gotta learn this, and so I went to Computer Village. If anyone knows where that is, it's somewhere in Lagos. Went to Computer Village and just bought this software called Photoshop and Photoshop Essentials, it was called. It was produced by Lynda.com. Lynda.com used to be the leading provider of Photoshop trainings back in the days. And it was a self-paced training, so I could watch the video at my own pace. And it took you through it lesson by lesson. And guess how much I paid for that tutorial and Photoshop? I think I paid about 30 naira, which is way less than $1 in today's world. But that's how I got into anything graphic design. But since then, I've moved on to using animation. I've gone on to web design, instructional design, and many other things. But just letting you know, we're talking about Photoshop origins. So that's my origin getting into design. So before we kick things off, really, I would like to show you this video. It's one that I reference a lot in these types of classes. Really just understanding the fundamentals of graphic design. So, what does graphic design mean to you? Hopefully some things that will be shown in this video will resonate with you and make you a better designer. If you don't get anything today, at least get the concepts in this video. All right. Do we have an agreement? Okay, I don't see any thumbs up, but I assume we do. So I'm going to play the video and we can all follow along. Well, not this video, definitely. Watch the actual video.
Texture and
Okay, I'm hearing that there's no sound. Wow. Thanks for speaking up. Thanks for speaking up. So you don't have sound? I'm pretty sure I'm sharing my sound. Millicent says it has sound. So could that be your own system? Maybe. Um, either
no,
way.
Millicent. I said there is no sound. There is no sound. I don't know whether
Okay.
others are hearing.
So there's no sound on your computer. You cannot hear the video. It looks like somebody else can. Um, because I'm pretty sure that I'm sharing my sound. So
Yeah, I cannot hear. From
yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great feedback. And I'll leave a link to the video in the chat so you can watch it on your own time. Really, the video is just an introduction to graphic design, to different elements that we use in graphic design. So these elements really are what work together to create what we know as graphic design. So we're talking about color, we're talking about shapes, we're talking about line, we're talking about texture, and different other things, which has been covered in the video. So the link to the video is in the chat. You can watch it maybe right after this session or in your spare time. Really, Photoshop is a tool that is created by Adobe. So Adobe, and there's several other tools within the Adobe Creative Suite. So you have the Adobe Creative Suite. You have Illustrator, you have Photoshop, you have InDesign, you have Adobe Premiere, you have Firefly, I believe, and a host of others. And these tools all work together in a way like you can build with these tools. There's Adobe Animate as well, there's Adobe Captivate, and several other tools that you can build with. But really, it's all about visual design. So whether you're creating a video or creating graphics, it's all about video. It's all about visual design. And visual design is one arm of communication, right? For example, I'm talking right now, but you can't see what I'm saying. Um, but visual design is all about seeing. It's communication that cannot happen without being seen, without using your eyes, essentially. Or maybe there's one technology that makes it possible nowadays. I don't know. But as I understand it, visual design is all visual. So when you first open up Photoshop, you will be met with this blank canvas. In some cases, maybe there isn't one and you have to create one. The way that you do that is go to the top menu and click on File and New. Um, File and New lets you open up a new document. So we're going to call this white canvas that you see. We're going to refer to this as a document. So really, all you're trying to do here is to give your file a name. So let's just call this test. And there are some presets that you can choose from. For me, I always like to go with using, well, depending on where you are or what you're used to. For me, it would probably be using inches. And for that, I have to just select inches. And I also want to make it A4 size. And I know A4 size just is automatically 8.5 by 11. So I already know my dimensions, but this is me creating a document that is the size of a page, so an A4 paper. And I want to set my resolution to at least 150. The higher your resolution, the higher your file is going to be. So, and what that means is the weight of the file. So when you save it, it could either go from KB to, which is, I don't know, is that kilobytes or something? And then it could go on to megabytes, right? So those are your two dimensions, or those are at least two of your types of file sizes. So oftentimes you want to do 8.5 by 11. That usually works out for many things that you want to create. At other times, you could want to create a 5 by 7 kind of postcard or something, but oftentimes this is what you'll be working with. So this can print on any paper, on any regular, like if you go to a business center, for example, and you want to print out a document, this will be the size. You can also go up to A3, which is a larger size than A4. Does anyone have any questions so far? If you have questions, please type it in the chat, or at least indicate if you can hear me. I want to make sure you can hear me. Millicent, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Thanks. Okay, perfect. Thanks for confirming. So really, you have your blank canvas, and I always tell people, like, the world is your canvas. You can design anything. This is just for you to design. And luckily, you have different tools in Photoshop that you can use for your design. So And we're going to go over those tools in a second. Let me make sure there's no one trying to get into the meeting. You can use different tools for your design. Let me try to make my screen a little larger. Well, it's not possible on this screen. So, hopefully you can see it. But on this right-hand side, you have your main layer. So this acts as your main layer, and which anything you add to the stage is added on this main layer, right? To the right-hand side. You can see my cursor, right? On this left-hand side is where you have all of your tools. So oftentimes you're going to go back to this selection tool because that lets you select elements that are on stage. And you can see the cursor, you can see the anchor that's telling you this cursor can move from up to down to left to right. Okay. So you can also start to do things like create a shape, which is down here. Sometimes you have to select to get to other menus. For example, in this case, you can select a box, you can select circle, you can select a line. I'm just going to select a circle. And when you're drawing a circle in Photoshop, if you don't hold anything and you just draw it out, it's going to be non-restrictive, right? But that's not what you want oftentimes. So if you want to keep this shape, you hold down your shift button, and that just lets you draw something that is more asymmetrical, right? So you make sure that you go back to your select button, make sure your auto select is turned on at the top. If you don't turn that on, it's not going to select. So you want to make sure your auto select is turned on, and then you can move this shape any way you want to move it to. Now, Canva is cool. All those other tools that are just coming out. What is going on here? That box, that circle keeps going back in place. All those tools are good, but there are advantages to using Photoshop. Photoshop gives you control over every pixel. So I can control all of the pixels in this shape where you cannot, there's a limit in Canva. It's more templatey, right? So things like, if I had a shape like this can be the start of anything pretty much, right? This could be a corner piece. You can hold down Control T to kind of adjust it. And you can start to walk your design. Remember what we just learned about design? Let's assume you're designing a poster here. You can start to use this as a base for your design, and just imagine all of the ideas that are flowing right now, right? You can have your logo down here, you can have your header, and so on. So let's just have a little fun with it, right? You can select your text selection tool over here, and once you click, you can start to type. So I know we did a Haler's residency challenge recently, and I was impressed by the submissions. Um, you can press Control C to select all of your text, and then you can go resize your text, right? So you can either just choose a size and you can type in there too. So if you want to be more specific, you can say 50 point. And when you're satisfied, you look for maybe a better font. Maybe I don't like that font. So depending on what you're creating, if you're creating something that's more like dramatic, you can start to choose different kinds of fonts. If you're creating something that's corporate, you can choose a simple font. But think about your space. Think about the space you're working in when you're creating oftentimes. So I often use a lot of words, so I like to use a font that is narrow. Like this is narrow. This is an example of a font that is narrow. I can use Control T to select it and scale. You drag from the edges. Always drag from the edges and hold your shift when you're scaling. So that lets you scale that text shape out. right? So you want to think about your readers. Is this legible enough? We can talk about font types. There's the serif and there's the sans serif. This is a font that has a serif, and those serifs are really just the corners. It's like this old school newspaper type of font, but you can opt to go for a modern type of font in some cases. For example, this doesn't look like it reads very well to me. I would prefer something like Roboto, or something that's just more, or even little could be a better example, or something that doesn't have those serifs, depending on what I'm creating, right? So let me just use Lato for this one, or League Gothic is actually a very good one. So you see the difference between a non-serif and a serif font. So this is more of what we would call a non-serif font, right? That means it doesn't have those corners and stuff. And when you're designing, feel free to explore different types of arrangements, right? It doesn't have to be like this. What else can we do to this poster? Does anybody want to contribute? Like, how can we make this Hala's residency title even stand out a bit more? What can we change? I'm gonna start calling names if you don't answer. Millicent, you want to try? What can we change about this poster? Do you want to come off mute or type it in the chat? All right, I'm just gonna help us out here. We can change the color for sure, or we can even add a black background like this. You see how that makes it stands out? And I'm not even, this isn't a background yet. I'm just selecting it, right? But that already could be something dramatic, right? Another thing we could do is to arrange this where Halas is on top and the residency is at the bottom. You can duplicate that layer and just do a Command J that lets you duplicate that layer. You can maybe have Halas at the bottom and you want to deselect that. You want to select this one, and it could be something like this where they're two separate words now, and you can start to play with them differently. Like, you can arrange them however you want and start to create something that's even, and who says everything has to be perfect on the screen, right? Like, you can make things kind of bleed into each other where you arrange them in a certain way that's interesting. It's all about interest, right? You're trying to generate visual interest. What makes this interesting, right? Even though it's a two-color thing so far, how could you add more interest to it, right? Could you start to look at the forms and see what can be arranged with each other, where things that to look like they belong together or apart? How can you arrange this? How can you arrange this in such a way where it makes somebody pause and think, like, what's going on here, right? Which is exactly the reaction you want from your audience. You want them to think, what's going on here, right? Another thing you could do is change the color. So you can easily change the color by selecting your, well, maybe we should change the residency one. So you could, just a second. You could change this to something like red or something. Let's just go for something a little dark, right? Um, Depending on your topic, maybe you're trying to go for a monotone, old school kind of mad. What's the name of that TV show? Mad Men or something. Yeah, if you're trying to go for that kind of look, probably want something like this. Another thing you could do is bring in an image, right? I do have an image here of Morgan Freeman. I could just copy this and add it here, right? So you're bringing in an image, and there's a lot you can do with this image, right? When you're designing your image, usually you want it to be like 3/4 of your slide. You can remove the background very easily. These tools over here lets you do that. You can go to Magic Wand and select all of the background. But the problem is it starts to, because his hair is so close to, I know Canva lets you do this automatically. So, you have the technology now. There's no need to start. I remember like back in the days, you have to like refine it and spend hours just trying to figure that out. You can also use a quick selection tool, which gives you a little more control so you can start to refine the edges. You can select minus at the top and use that to deselect instead. Is this new to anybody? I want to be sure you're even picking up something new at least. Let me know with thumbs up if you're at least learning something new. And what I just did there after selecting was to delete it. All right. You can go back to choosing select at the top here, and you're using that tool to refine your edges, right? You use the minus to bring some of that back, right? And if you can do this with Canva, at least this spot, then don't waste time trying to learn it in Photoshop. This I advise people to, you know, leverage AI for sure. Don't feel like you need to like do it the old school way or the difficult way. Definitely Canva can do a much better job at this part. But the new Photoshop, I'm sure, has some AI tools as well that lets you quickly deselect stuff. So Photoshop will still be my preference for something like that. So I'm trying to trim off the edges, and that's using the lasso tool. This one is called. So all you're doing is selecting around where you're trying to trim. And now you almost have, and another thing else you can do with this guy is take away his freckles. Photoshop lets you able to do that using a clone stamp. And this is the clone stamp. If you hover over the tools, you would see each one. Using the clone stamp, I could select the clone stamp, and I hope you can see my brush size. That's my brush size. I only want a little. I can start to take away some of his freckles. Now, in doing that, all I need to do is go to a part without freckles, but I want to select a part that is close to where I'm trying to remove freckles from. So I look for something clean on his face. I hold down my Alt button and I select it. And you can see the size of my brush is changing. Now I have a sample of his skin that I'm going to use to paste around. So you can just go anywhere with pimples or freckles, or whatever that is, and start to select it. Once you select, that freckle is gone. Freckle is gone. And sometimes you have to do that rapidly, but always remember to go back and select. Like, don't just keep using one part. Like, you want to be as close as possible to whichever skin layer, so it looks more natural. It looks more like a natural gradient. Like, I wouldn't take skin from his face and put it over here. I would instead go to somewhere close to where the freckles I'm trying to take out is, make my brush size. Someone wants to join this call. Who is it? All right. So you can start to take out the freckles still using the clone stamp brush. I can start to select, hold down my Alt, and so on. So that's how easy it is to remove any of the blemishes on a model's face. Now, hopefully, you're going to try this on your own. It's super easy. There are tools out there. There are AI tools that do that nowadays, but it's still good to learn it the Photoshop way, at least, depending on what tools you have available to you. Any questions so far? All right. So let's keep refining this poster at least. So there's a lot more that we can do to this poster. We can make this a little larger. And we can go to image, adjustment. We can make it black and white. And that gives you a little more control over what you want added, right? You can start to refine this, some of these channels. This is just telling you the different colors that are represented on this face. You can adjust these however you like, and so on. And when it makes sense to you, you can hit OK. That's saved. Something else you can do is you can go to the blend modes. So there are different blend modes over here. You can start to play around with which one makes sense over here. Well, I'm not on, well, yeah, it's the right one. So you can do multiply or just any of these blend modes. But really, when you're blending, oftentimes you're trying to blend in relation to something else. So maybe let's make this normal again. If you're using blend modes, you're probably trying to add either more light or more darkness, something more to what you're working with. So you can duplicate this by clicking on Control J, and then you can apply that blend mode to the top layer. So it gives you that filter that you normally wouldn't see. I believe this is where filters originated. You can also reduce the opacity of the blend mode. So normally I would put it at like 75% or something, so I can start to see exactly what it's doing, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So in this case, the top layer has a blend mode, but the bottom layer doesn't have a blend mode. So I can start to say, okay, I want to use a brush or an eraser, for example, to start to generate more cool effects. And I want to make sure this isn't like 100% kind of thing. I can reduce the opacity of that eraser and start to refine certain, depending on what you're trying to do, right? Like it really depends on, but knowing that the blend mode, knowing that well, there's probably a better way to do that. So knowing that you have two different modes on this model, right? So you have, if you turn the eye icon on, you can see the different blend modes, right? So it's almost like a second person right there. So you can either use something like Gaussian blur, which you can get when you go to filter, blur, and use your Gaussian blur to kind of refine things. So it's really whatever look you're trying to achieve. Like this to me looks like if you're trying to create something that's very grainy or but at least it gives you like different effects that you wouldn't normally get, right? See how much this poster has changed since we started creating it. So that these are all the kind of controls that Photoshop gives you that you may not find with tools like Canva. I see Uchena just joined. Uchena, are you there? Okay, awesome. Are you able to come off mute? Tell us your experience with Photoshop. Oh, anyone? Does anyone have experience with Photoshop? Is what I'm showing you? Is it too basic, or are you hoping for something more? Because I can certainly look for more advanced stuff to show. Um, yeah, and really, Photoshop is also great for if you're trying to, maybe you have like 50 photos that you're trying to scale down very quickly. You can create actions for it. So, and the way you create actions is by going to Windows. You can click on Actions. That opens up this action panel that you can, let's just expand this. This action panel is saying that whatever you record, you can apply it to almost anything. So let's create a new action by clicking on that guy. We can just leave it as action one, and then hit record. So from here on out, whatever happens on my screen will be recorded, and I can save it as an action and apply it to another image, which is going to save me time. So I'm going to hit record. And now when I maybe just open up a random image on my computer, maybe an image like this, I can, so it's recording, right? Remember what I said? So this action has been recorded. So anything I do on this image is going to be recorded. And I don't have to rush or anything because it's only recording the steps, right? So let's say I'm trying to resize this image. I go to image size and make this maybe 400, which is like half the size. Hit OK, right? And then maybe close it out. Save it. So go to File, Save, and so that's one action. If I hit stop on this, it has recorded that action. So the way that I would pull that action out is by going to, well, I think it's already there. So this is the action. So action one, that's the name of my action. If I were to bring in a different image and apply action one to it, it would just rescale. It would just rescale based upon. So let me look for an image on my screen. Just a second. So let's use this image. So let's just say I apply action one. I make sure I'm on action one and then hit play. It just rescales it, right? But in this case, it also closed. Well, it didn't close it, but so it went through all of the actions. It's let me make sure that I'm saying the correct thing. So it's opened it. Oh, so open was one of the actions that I recorded. So it's looking for that open action and it's not seeing that. So let's go to image size and then just hit play. And you see it's going to rescale that image from remembering what happened in the first one. So that's just actions. It's one of the long existing tools in Photoshop that even Canva doesn't have right now. So if you're looking to rescale multiple images, that's one way to go about it. Any questions so far? Wow, quiet class today. which hopefully is a good thing. But let's go back to our poster real quick. So with the poster, what else can we add? Could we throw in a background? Could we, maybe make a gradient? Would that make it? So the way to do that is to go to your layers and, pick out, we're on layer 2 right now, and we're just trying to add a background, maybe a background gradient. So here's where your gradient tool comes into play. You can just select it, and you can choose the colors that you want over here. There's so many presets, but those are sometimes too colorful. What you really want to do is maybe change this to black or something. So at least that's what I would do, is to change that to black, hit OK. And with the gradients, this is what it's really saying is, we're flowing from black to white. So, and this is everything that's happening in between that is just what the gradient is, right? So hit OK, and then your gradient tool, you can just draw a line knowing that you're on that background. So it's going to be in the back, right? There's your gradient. You could either say that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you can also make it fade from the bottom so you don't lose that. I don't think it's really a good gradient in this case, but there are different things you can do. You can just add a touch of gray over there. Like, it doesn't have to be, it depends on how you use it, right? So you can have different layers where you're just adding like a dash of gradient, where, you're thinking subtle, right? You're not trying to do too much. Especially in this case, you're keeping things a bit classy. Another thing you can do is you can even add that gradients to the front of the image. So in this case, so it blends a little bit more into the background. You do that by clicking on layer, you click on your gradient. Well, what you want to do in this case is to use a transparent gradient, so it flows from a solid color to transparent. Yeah, I think that's what I was missing there. So these are all stops. It's showing you how much color it's going to add. In this case, I'm not sure why that's not adding. Sorry. Yeah, I was trying to go for transparent. It looks like some things have changed in Photoshop since I last used it. Anyway, we're going to keep this and try to add that gradient. That just lets it blend into the background a little bit more. So depending on what you're creating, right, you can start to make things look a little more seamless. You could reduce the opacity so it's not too much. And on the image, you can double click on the layer to bring up the layer styles. Layer styles are also great for adding different things. You can start to add drop shadow even to the guy. So, you want to show some depth of field. Here's where you can control that drop shadow. You can add some distance to it. You can add some spread. You can make it larger, or you can change the direction, right? By clicking on the angle. In this case, I think, we're trying to go for something that looks the most natural, right? I mean, in my head, I'm thinking maybe he's in an alley or something. And what the type of light that would probably hit him is a sharp light, which is going to cast a sharp shadow. It's not going to be, there's not, it's going to be like a sharp shadow. Maybe a car is Maybe there's a car just shining headlights on him, is being discovered pretty much. That's something like what it would look like, right? So maybe the distance isn't too much. Other things you can do is you can start to, well, you got a stroke, but it's not really helpful in this case. Stroke is really just, adding, yeah, that's all it is. And you can add the satin effect or overlay. Overlay too is sometimes good depending on how you're planning to use it. Here's where you can again use your blend modes to, but it can really create some very cool effect if, well, maybe not right. That's so terrible. Um, but you get the idea. Like maybe we're trying to do like brown, so it's closer to a skin tone. Um, but the idea is you're controlling every pixel. You're controlling things, and not just leaving it up to AI as we're used to doing nowadays. It makes sense for there to be a bit of red since the residency has a bit of red on it. What else can we do here? Um, if it's a shape, you can do a bevel. Like we may not need that in this case, but I would still like to show you. So for the text, we could do the same thing. Go to layer properties and add a bevel effect, which is really just making it 3D, right? Um, you can start to control what that looks like. You have different blend modes for working. Everything has blend modes, so it's really controlling the pixels again. And what are pixels? Those are just, everything you see is a pixel, is made of a pixel. So, working with, everything you see here is a pixel. And filter gives you more options, right? You can start to blur things out. You can start to, for example, even the top one, even the text, you can start to mess with the text with filter. You can use a blur effect. In some cases, you could use motion blur. But you need to rasterize the text before you're able to do that, which I've done in this case. So you see that effect. It's starting to have some really cool effect. You don't want to overdo it. Like this will be overdoing it. Well, depending on what effect you're going for, maybe, that's a motion blur. Like it's the same effect as, so maybe you make a copy, right? Control J. Now you have two of those, which you can mess with one of them by going to filter, go to blur, go to motion blur, and hit OK. And then you can mess with the bottom layer without affecting the top one, right? So maybe you just want a little bit of blur effect. Like that's how those things are created. Like it starts to look outside of the box. Like it's not the regular stuff you're seeing. So maybe you're trying to make a statement with something like this, but always consider your audience, consider what message you're trying to pass when you're using some of these tools. With filter, you can still, and when I say you can control all the pixels, this is what I mean. You can go to edit, you can go to transform, and you can start to maybe even apply a warp effect. Or so let's try the warp effect. So warp effect is really just that's not showing up. I'm not sure why. Well, it's here. So, but I thought I could control. Well, with the warp effect, you could start to maybe create different effects on things. maybe you want, and these are all presets, right? You can, I'm not sure why you would do this, but that's just one way, one of the things you can do. Let's try that again. So go to edit, go to transform, and there's a particular one I'm looking for. There's a free transform. Well, with free transform, you can, well, that just lets you. And if anyone knows something about this, please come off mute. And it's all about learning together, right? I don't claim to know it all. I definitely don't. So you can start to use different styles, even on your, yeah, distort is another one. Distort lets you, you can apply a pinch, twirl, wave, whatever else. So in this case, when I click on pinch, it's giving me this menu, and it's telling me that I can well, that's going to be tough to see, especially for text. But it lets you control that text. What else? No, it's applying a filter. Yeah, you can add distort. Yeah, but it's just good to mess with some of this tools at that point. And if you want to, there's something called matte where you can go to layer and, well, in this case, there is no, let's say you're trying to remove the edges. Maybe you selected it and you still notice, like in this case, I'm seeing some white edges over here. You can select them and go to layer, go to matten and the fringe, or remove black. You see which one works best. So sometimes the fringe would work, where you can specify how much pixels you want to defringe it by, and you can almost see the difference immediately. Or you can go to matten and do the same thing, so remove white matte, and so on. So those are all just tools that you can use. I know we've come to the almost the end of this, but if you found this valuable, please let me know. If you at least learn something new, or if you're gonna try this out on your own, I think it's worth trying. I mean, there are many tools out there. There's Canva now and all of that, but understanding these principles or web things where you can, really customize your designs, I think is important. But what's also key is, just having that learning mindset, because you never know what you're going to learn. I learned Photoshop on my own all those years ago, and that's what I still use still today. All of these knowledge is, I haven't even used Photoshop in a long time, but it's still there, right? And I apply it to every other tool that I work with. But yeah, it's been great having you join us for this session. We do have a Canva session tomorrow, and we have how to get to the next level in your career coming up at 5 p.m. tomorrow. On Sunday, we have a web design class, and I think an AI class as well. But all of those will be either sent to you to opt into or added to your calendar. Please let us know how we're doing, and if there are any adjustments needed, we'll be glad to make those adjustments. Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.